My name is Ralph Isenberg. I am the founder of the Isenberg Center for Immigration Empowerment. For over a year, my organization worked on freeing an 11-year-old boy from El Salvador who had his entire family of 5, him being the 6th member, up here in the United States. A boy is on his way home from school in a older style school bus that you typically would see in the Latin Americas. And all of a sudden, the bus is stopped by an unknown gang. The bus driver is pistol whipped, and the next thing you know, the bus driver is shot to death. Now, the boy and everybody else, Alexis Marroquin, ran what they felt was for their lives. But you see, violence was not new to Alexis at that point, because a year earlier, his sister had been in school and learned the news that her 8th grade teacher had been shot to death for refusing to pay a ransom. One questions, what type of country is this where this sort of violence takes place to the children? The country is El Salvador. The country has had struggles throughout its existence. Currently, the FMLN party is in power. This must be where children must live with such fear of violence. Well, it's simple. It's a daily toss-up between whether El Salvador or a neighboring nation is the murder capital of the world. And with the United States crackdown, DEA crackdown on drugs, human trafficking of children has become more profitable in many of these nations. And this country has yet to get a grip on what human trafficking of minors really is about and how we should be going about controlling it. Because what happens in El Salvador is that there is local government collaboration with the national police. The national police is either in collaboration with the FM 13 or the Street 18 party. And they work in rural school areas and essentially crack these schools down to make parents feel like they must coyote their children to the United States to face an uncertain future. It is not uncommon in the Latins to have a father and a mother come to the United States, undocumented, work here in hopes that they can meet the 10-year mark, where then they can adjust their status, and then call for their children. They normally bring their children here after that time, and those children go out and become citizens, just like the parents. But they leave their children with either a grandparent or an uncle. And that was what happened in this case. Sylvia, which is the older daughter, and Alexis, the subject today, were left behind because the parents came here and went to work. They always sent money back because the children went to good public schools and private schools. Grandma took care of them, and the uncle took care of them. What was not counted on was that the uncle would become involved in the arena party, which was in opposition to the FMLN party. And as a result of that, threats started flying. The United States had a project there under Project CARE where they had built a sewage treatment plant in one of the small towns. And what was proposed was that gift from the people of the United States was going to be federalized or localized, so then all of a sudden the local people would have to pay outrageous rates that would go directly into the hands of party members. This is what the arena party was fighting. This is what led to death threats, and those death threats went on to lead to extreme violence against people that were protesting. The uncle of Alexis was a big protester, and as a result, there were threats on his life. He had to drop out of school. He couldn't go outside. Imagine being holed up in your home for 9 months of a year. And yet you couldn't tell the young lad what was really going on. We worked very hard to try to get Alexis out of El Salvador once we learned of his existence. The El Salvadorian government gave IC permission in one day to go get him. We went to the consulate here in Dallas, 1 day permission. It took the United States over 9 months of haggling to decide that a 10, 11-year-old boy should be with his parents. Now that's a shame for one reason. The United States is a big, big, big super player when it comes to the United Nations refugee movement, and even bigger a player when it comes to the handling of children affairs. And yet, isn't this a shirking of the duties? Furthermore, the United States, as is El Salvador, as is Guatemala, as is Mexico, are all members, signatories of the OAS, Organization of American States, and they're supposed to be working to prevent situations like this. In fact, the capital city of El Salvador is San Salvador. The San Salvador Accord, that was a sign, states very clearly, Article 16, a child, a minor, should not be without a mother. Now, how is it that the United States can criticize so many other nations and put on its goody two-shoes around the world and then leave one boy stranded? Now, when I was down there, one of the harsh realities, in fact, they were riveting words from a U.S. State Department worker, is he told me, he says, I really don't have time to worry about what you're doing. What you're doing is noble, but there are 6 million people that went out of this country. I just looked at the guy and I said, sir, you're forgetting one point. You can forget about the 6 million if you want. But today I'm only concerned about one, and what you're doing is you're refusing to help that one. And I think that's really a sad statement. I think that really speaks sadly of your sense of morality and how you treat your fellow man. I'll tell you one thing, El Salvador is not your country that you want to stay in very long. There are military forts and trucks driving around on almost every block. There are literally hundreds of abandoned cars, broken down. There is no infrastructure as far as the streets and highways. It's just, thin little roads of gravel or asphalt. The stench from the cooking is overwhelming. Every building that has any value at all is heavily armed. The worst building, and you would expect it, would be the United States Embassy. I called that the Citadel. It was absolutely ridiculous. If you've got to arm an embassy that much, then you might as well not even have an embassy. But, there was a little bit of a joke there. The United States Citizen and Immigration Services, which has got offices down there, and they're supposed to be helping people. And El Salvador is one of the biggest nations that has temporary protected status people. They only see people twice a week. I really couldn't figure out what they do the other 3 times of the week. It's not a safe place for children. And, I wasn't there 10 minutes, and people were already asking me about, are you an American? Yeah. Can you help me get out of here? Well, that was a pretty good shock. I had been warned ahead of time about the taxi cabs, out of the airport. Let me tell you, and you can laugh, but I laid down on the seat rather than be seen in the cab because I'd heard that you could get shot. Well, now having been there, I believe it. An interesting experience. Let's reflect on what perhaps is the ultimate cause of what is going on in El Salvador. I mentioned TPS before, temporary protected status. Well, what TPS does, quite simply, is it puts people from one family up in the United States and people from that same family down in El Salvador. Now, El Salvador uses the United States dollar as its standard. It is not only common, but it is the rule that families are going to help families. And so a lot of people work awful hard to send money down to El Salvador to help their families. But if you work at McDonald's, you're going to make $200 to $225 a month, working 6 days a week, 10 hours a day. And that's it. And if you want a computer, you're going to pay $800. The bank presence of American banks is outrageous. So what's really happening? It's a vicious Yankee cycle, if you will. The money is being sent to the families that are poor. The poor are spending the money on goods and services and on getting wages. And all that money is funneled up back here, right into banks and right into corporate America. And it's a ripoff. That is not how we should be treating a fellow nation that's part of the Organization of American States that we say we want to help grow and develop. I'll tell you one thing in conclusion. John F. Kennedy never intended that to be when he started Project Alliance, which led into the Peace Corps. That was not the vision that JFK had of how America would be perceived around the world, more or less, in this continent. As you can see, I have changed shirts because I want to change the topic and close out the discussion of Alexis with some personal observations that are very personal. I love immigrants. Well, I better love them because I'm an immigrant myself. And so many people in this country, the vast majority of us, are immigrants as well. And yet we find ourselves in a time now where we have turned our backs on immigrants, their families, and we've made life very difficult for folks. This young man was alone. 5 members of his family were in the United States. And despite common sense, despite a UN resolution, despite an Organization of American States accord, the United States government just was not interested in bringing this young man home without a good fight. Well, they got that fight. And Isenberg, Center for Immigration Empowerment, ICE, won. But did we really win? I don't know. I don't think we really win when we have to go through such a struggle to save the life of one child that could have very easily died. A mixed feeling for me, because even though I was so angry with what was taking place, I was also so happy to see that American Airlines. It kind of reminded me of their commercial which said, "Welcome home again." It's kind of how I felt. I'm not promoting American Airlines, but it was a great commercial. Welcome home again. I knew with that airplane I was going home and I was taking young Alexis with me. And the moment we touched down, well, no, let me back up. On the way, he just watched us get closer and closer and closer and closer. And he was getting more and more excited. And the moment we touched down, I can honestly say that I've never felt more proud of being an American because I was able to use the Bill of Rights to bring about a necessary change and to get this young man reunited with his family. I think really that perhaps says it all. But then I saw the photograph of me walking out with young Alexis out of international arrivals. Well, I've had many reasons over the years of my life to smile and be happy. But I looked closely, and that was a special day. I was really happy that day. And then you watch the instantaneous explosion of emotion that took place when the family just rushed this young man. And it truly was an experience that will go down in my life as one of my best. Yet, at the same time, I had met the day before a lady named Santos. She made a human error. She went to El Salvador thinking that her status permitted her to travel. And frankly, I looked at the document. Looked to me like it did. I had 2 Border Patrol agents look at the document. They said it did, but it didn't. Her mother was tending to her grandmother who had had a serious heart attack. The trip was truly a humanitarian trip. And Santos, after 17 years of being in the United States in temporary protected status, went to El Salvador to tend to her family with 3 of her minor children. A 4th minor child was left behind, age 16. When it was time to come home, the 3 minor children were put on an airplane, an Avianca, but without their mother. And you can only imagine the shock of the 16-year-old when she greeted the airplane at the DFW airport to find out that 4 minor U.S. children, all citizens, were now motherless because of a simple error. You know, if somebody murders somebody, there are punishments for that. If somebody robs somebody, there are punishments for that. But we're not talking about a crime here. We're talking about a simple error. And I'm reminded of an old cliche. To err is human. That is part of the human experience. And yet, immigration was once again throwing the book at this woman and not permitting her to come home, even though they have the full authority to do it. And they chose. It's their election. They chose to permit 4 United States citizen children to remain without their mother. They don't have a father either, by the way. So the godmother is taking care of them. This is really my final challenge. All 4 of the minors are now needing various professional mental illness services. And when you have got a 12-year-old daughter who all of a sudden has cut marks going across her wrist because she is so lonely for her mother, isn't enough enough? When do we stop the bleeding? I repeat, when do we stop the bleeding and keep these families united as they are supposed to be? Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Now the ICEE organization blows the walls at the U.S. border so that we can welcome Santos back into this country. I am so honored and happy to have Jeremiah, or Jeremani, and Ruben with me, two of Santos's children. And I asked them earlier if they want to talk, and they really feel like not talking because it's all very upsetting for them. Ruben is 6 years old, and he simply just wants his mother home. That's all. It's a simple request. Jeremani has a little bigger request. She just wants it all to end. She's tired of it. The pressure of not having her mother is too much. She wants her mother to comb her hair for her in the morning and to do things for her that mothers are supposed to do. We have two other children missing. Karina is 13. Karina is too upset to be here with us. Karina, earlier this year, caused damage to herself over her mother being gone, which caused great concern to the family. We hope we have that under control, but that is the pain that has taken place with these children. Yulissa, the oldest, age 16, who's turned 17. Great student who's dropped out of school. Now has a warrant out for her arrest for truancy. And that is all due to a mother that has not been allowed to come back to the United States, even though she has every right and entitlement to be here. She was here for 17 years under temporary protective status. She made a simple human error. She never broke a crime. She made an error. You don't punish people for making an error, and you especially don't punish children when an error is made. God bless these two children, and we will prevail, and we will get Santos home. That is the goal of ICEE, and we do not stop until we get that done.